Hello BookTube, it's Ros of Scully Dandling About the Books.
And Tilly from Tilly's Shelf.
And it's the end of the month and it's time for our discussing drama this month.
So every month we try and get together, or we virtually get together to discuss a play that could be any play from any time and any place.
Absolutely. And this month we've got together in a kind of Airbnb place in the Yorkshire Dales, hence the
lovely.
flowery curtains.
And we've been out bird spotting on the Yorkshire Dales and generally having a lovely time in the late March sunshine.
In late March sunshine, so our noses might be pink. So, what play did we do this month? We picked, well, you say,
Fuenteovejuna by Lope de Vega.
And the reason that we picked this play is because we are both reading and taking part in a read-along of Don Quixote by Cervantes in March and April, and we thought it would be lovely to read a play by one of his contemporaries. Yeah. So another author from the Spanish.
Yeah, we're immersing ourselves in the Siglo de Oro.
Yes.
The golden century, the Spanish golden age literature.
Yeah, which I have to say is something that I really knew nothing about previously before reading that book and this play.
I
had
limited experience with the Spanish Golden Age, in that at college I studied Life is a Dream, La Vida es Sueño by Calderón, and Calderón is considered to be one of possibly the most polished and the greatest of the writers of that age, and Life is a Dream is really like one of the standout plays from the era, and it is a very good play.
But we didn't read that. Why didn't we read it?
Because I've already read it. I don't want to read it. I've not only read it, I've studied it. I don't want to go back to that one when I could start with something completely new. Lope de Vega is, like Calderón, a very well-known name from the period, and was much more prolific and really shaped the genre of plays from that era.
Yeah, he anything up to 2,000 plays attributed to him.
Definitely over 1,000. Some are a little bit questionable. Some might have been other people pretending to be him because he was so successful.
So it's like if you wanted your play to sell, you'd say it was written by Lope de Vega. So.
But we've got 450 of them remaining. And he really claimed that he wrote some of them in a day. He just dashed them off, and they weren't performed for any substantial length of time. They weren't. They tended to just be put on for a couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks, and people had to catch them when they were on, and then they.
I mean, that was one of the things that really surprised me about hearing that about the play, and made sense of why the play was as it is, which we'll come on to explain, because it was like a sort of a disposable item almost. And whereas perhaps Shakespeare at the same time, although he was producing quite a lot of plays, they would be put on repeatedly, and people would have favourites and people would see them multiple times, whereas this was like a kind of a
flash in the pan.
Yes, very different. Animals.
It was less of an investment. You didn't want it. You didn't necessarily need it to have any particular staying power. People just had to find it amusing at the time. So, but we picked this one because it's probably one of his handful of most well thought of plays. Yeah, one of his most read, most studied works as well, because of the themes that it has.
Yes, which were really interesting. And that if you were going to ask me, which you haven't, what was the best thing about this play?
I'm sorry, I haven't asked you yet. What was the best thing about this play? I thought we'd introduce it a little bit more.
Well,
first.
we could, but I mean, when you asked me what was the best thing about this play, what I would say is the themes. That was I found it really, really interesting. I didn't necessarily find it a really brilliant bit of literature or a really brilliant drama, but I was
more impressed by the themes.
Yeah.
So, just to go back to more of the introductory material, the Spanish Golden Age was kind of broadly the 17th century, a little bit before, and this play was thought to be written around about 1612 to 1614, but then it was published. It was one of the plays that was put into one of his collected works of plays in 1619. But it was based actually on historical events.
Yeah, but I was going to say, so like Shakespeare, he was well thought of enough that other people collected his plays and published them.
Some of which he was involved in editing and putting together. So this play was based on actual events that happened in 1476, when the small town of Fuenteovejuna overthrew their leader and killed him for being a
dastardly type. No.
Yeah.
Oppressive.
I sometimes have that feeling of, when history is written by the victors,
yeah.
and you just think, I wonder whether he was actually as bad as he's presented. But anyway, they overthrew him, and when people came to see what had happened there, they said, oh, Fuenteovejuna did it. It wasn't one individual person, the town as a whole. So Fuenteovejuna lo hizo, sorry for my Spanish, it became like a byword for, you can't blame any one person for this. It's a joint decision, or it was a joint blame, I suppose.
Yes, the sort of I am Spartacus
Yeah.
moment
Yeah.
in Spanish history.
Yeah. shared moments.
We'll all share responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
These historical events were then recorded by somebody called Fray Francisco de Rades in 1572, so a century later. So there's space for some kind of mix-ups, and then this plays about 150 years after events. There are some other events that Lope de Vega incorporates that weren't exactly contemporaneous, but he just fits them all in to get a bit of
make a good story.
A good story with them.
And one of the key things is that this was a time of regime change, I suppose,
so
in
you get
Spain.
Political upheaval on the micro scale because the town is overthrowing an oppressor, and you also get a broader political upheaval because there's conflict between the people who are to become the Reyes Católicos, the Catholic monarchs of Ferdinand and Isabella.
Even I've heard of them. Yeah.
The kind of the famous ones who united Spain, had the Reconquista, and then ended up funding Christopher Colombo and everything, and Alfonso and Juana from Portugal, who also had a kind of a claim to the throne. The
alternative claimants to the throne. But and yes, so it was at a key. It's historical fiction, as it were, of a key time in Spanish history that when Spain becomes Spain.
Yeah, exactly. Because these the Catholic monarchs coming to power is such a turning point in Spanish history.
And the people in the town claim that when they were overthrowing their oppressive overlord, it was in order that they because they wanted to choose to be ruled by Ferdinand and Isabella instead
of Alfonso and Juana, that their oppressive overlord has been supporting.
Yeah. So that's the sort of historical
sphere.
Context.
And then there's some other things that go on in the play. There's a little bit of a romance added in, which was quite common when they took these historical stories and adapted them for stage. They gotta have
love interest.
A little bit of romance.
Yeah, you can't not have the love interest.
Exactly. And a little bit of this kind of conflict between peasants and nobility was something that Lope de Vega sort of brought into Golden Age, and the mixture of comedy and tragedy was something that he liked to do. Yeah. The plays tended to have a happy ending, but there's some definite more tragic or dramatic elements
and the sort of clownish figure,
the gracioso, or the funny guy in this is Menga. And I kind of felt like with reading Don Quixote, the parallels between the kind of gracioso character and Sancho Panza, for instance, he obviously fills that role in Don Quixote.
And one of the intriguing elements of reading this is that Cervantes and Lope de Vega were they were contemporaries. Well, Cervantes is about 18 years older than him. So
but then Lope de Vega as a younger author was becoming astronomically more successful.
So they were rivals. I guess so. That gave an added sort of piquancy to reading this.
Did you want to share some of the things that Cervantes said?
When you read Don Quixote, you come across sort of various references, explicit and implicit to Lope de Vega. There's one bit where he's gets some characters to talk about literature and what's good and bad in literature, and basically he sort of says that basically some people the plays have become a saleable merchandise, as they say, so it's like the idea that Lope de Vega's writing these cheap things that people just to and The truth of this can be seen in the infinite number of plays composed by one of the most felicitous minds in these kingdoms, which displays so much grace and so much charm, such elegant verses, such fine language, such grave thoughts, so eloquent and lofty a style, that his fame is known throughout the world. So there, it's like he's being complimentary about him. And then, because these works attempt to accommodate the taste of the theatre companies, not all of them have reached the necessary degree of perfection. And apparently Lope de Vega really took offence at that. Because it was so obvious he was talking about him and complimenting him, and then real
digging in. And there are kind of signs, you know, I said he wrote some of these plays in a day, and there's kind of signs of haste or signs of a potential lack of attention to detail or...
I mean, there were some bits that felt a bit like padding, actually.
Yeah, like he thought, oh, this is a bit short. Rather than actually develop the characters, I'll just add in a little dialogue about the printing press. So that's potentially his kind of returning jibe, is he's talking about, oh, you know, when with the introduction of the printing press, some authors that had a reputation for gravity have been revealed as being really quite silly. That's what he says. So you have to wonder who he's having a go at with that.
Absolutely, because this was after
the first part of Don Quixote was published. So Don Quixote was published in 2 parts, one before this play and one
after. So and in the second half of Don Quixote, he really Cervantes really kind of goes for the kill, because he caricatures Lope de Vega in the character of a puppet master putting on a puppet play, you know, so that's about as offensive as a literary sort of rivalry gets, isn't it? So there we go. So that added something to the play. But let's talk about the structure of the play itself.
Okay.
Because it's a bit disjointed, was my feeling.
Yeah, it's got some really strong moments, and moments that would be fantastic and dramatic to put on stage.
Oh, yes.
It's got some good speeches.
Yes. Laurencia's monologue is fantastic. Yeah.
Didn't always come across, so we should say our translation was by Stanley Appelbaum and done in 2002. And he was quite keen to make it accurate and like within a couple of lines of accuracy.
Yeah,
I don't think he was always very smooth.
He was writing it for a dual language edition, which was great because
it was very handy for me because I read it in both, and my 17th century Spanish is a bit weak.
So he rather than a kind of a fluid translation to sort of, you know, capture the spirit, but, you know, deviate a little from the line by line accuracy, he was taking care to match line by line so that you could use the dual language sort of version successfully, and I think that took away a bit of the shine off it.
Even still, some of his choices of translation I felt were a little bit clunky. Yeah. Even sticking to the line by line.
He's not a poet himself. Yeah.
But you know, he's done it for a purpose.
Yeah. Because one of the things that I could see, although I don't read Spanish, but you could see looking at Spanish, you know, I mean, it's in various different forms of verse, and it uses a lot of assonance, and so I felt like there was probably literary qualities in the original that I wasn't getting in the translation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I wouldn't say it is, you know, the highest work of literature that you could have. Yeah. But it did have bits of rhyme, bits of wordplay as well that didn't always translate so well. And the verse structure really added to the pace of the play, and some of that pacing was lost both by trying to read the dual translation and, you know, in the English version. And you'd have that in performance, you'd get that pace to it.
There was some stock characters, but there were also some good, really, you know, there was a few really vivid characters in the play. Laurencia is one, so she's the love interest, you know, the attractive girl who's, you know, someone's in love with, who's threatened by the baddie, and, you know, so and she's a well developed character. There was some, and the baddie, the commander, he was a real, you know, twirling moustaches,
fairy tale villain kind of character,
you know. So he was good fun. You know, enjoyed reading him. Yeah. Whereas some of the other characters were a bit like, they sort of came in, did a bit.
There were a lot of characters.
Yeah.
And that meant that there wasn't space to develop them.
Yeah. But maybe on the stage, if it was performed, you could put more into some of those individuals, give them you needed to kind of draw on their little mannerisms, or and you would get more fun from it.
And actors were known for playing kind of stock roles, so I'd imagine if you were going to your typical chorale theatre, which is like a big courtyard area where the theatres were held, with your normal group of actors, you'd kind of you'd almost have a developed actor rather than developed characters, and you would know what they would bring to that role.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the striking things about it is, it made me understand more how they put on drama then, because as you say, it was a sort of quite a limited stage in these chorales, and with no scenery, and very much depended on costume and the words. So you get a scene change, and there's no, you've gone from the town to by the battlefield, or a pasture where the shepherds are.
But they always seem to mention it in the text and say, oh, here we are in the town square. do you want to find a nice space in the square to sit down, or something like that? To kind of orientate the audience quite effectively.
Absolutely.
And also about what they could and couldn't present on stage. And there is quite a lot of violence in this play, but all of it is, pretty much all of it is off stage, and you hear like voices within or something that's... So people being tortured.
So one of the best scenes is the torture scene.
Yes.
So they're on the rack, and different people from the town are being tortured, and you hear it in that you hear, turn the rope again and stretch him harder, and
and there's characters on stage saying, what's he going to say? What's he going to say?
Is he going to?
Yeah. I can't believe they're torturing even children now, and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the scene in which everyone resolutely doesn't confess, or they say, I'm going to confess, I'm going to say who did it, and then they say
Fuenteovejuna
did it, so like the town did it.
And that's like this Graciosa character of Menga, who he's set up as, well, it's like the town always underestimates him, or the town thinks that he's going to be really that he's going to let them down, but he actually comes through. And there's this setting up of him in the first act where they're talking about what's the meaning of love kind of thing, and he's like, oh yes, I believe in love, I believe in self-love, I believe everyone loves themselves and they protect themselves. But actually, when it comes down to it, there are two moments where he sacrifices his own well-being in order to try to protect other people, sometimes unsuccessfully, but he comes through good.
So he's a character I would love to see performed, because you could do a lot with
a good actor with that role.
With that role, just like you could with the commander, the villain. Who's always and he has two horrible sidekicks who are constantly trying to get women, like basically carry off women for his pleasure. Which is why one of the reasons why
the darker themes of the play.
One of the darker themes, because it fluctuates between, as you say, comedy and tragedy, and key to the town deciding to rebel against him is the monologue by Laurentia.
Yeah, where he's kind of abducted her, and there's kind of the suggestion that she's successfully fought him off, but it comes back dishevelled. Just lambasting the men, her father saying, you can't be my father, you've allowed this to happen, and generally picking on each of them to say, how are you letting this happen to all of the young women in the village?
She sort of shames the men, and they take action. And then one of the most enjoyable bits of the action is they all take arms and they go and they take on the commander, and the women decide that they're going to do it as well. They're going to do it too. They're going to arm themselves and join in, and they do
with slightly varying degrees of commitment. So Laurentia's kind of leading the charge, and they get to this doorway, and Laurentia's like, right, I'm going to go in, because the commander's hiding just behind it. I'm going in to take him down. And Pasquale, who's her friend, is like, well, it's okay if we just guard the door. We're okay if we just stay outside. So Pasquale stays outside, and Laurentia goes in, and there is like. There's some suggestion that potentially it could have been her that actually killed the commander, but it's never said, because obviously it was for Fuenteovejuna. It was not an individual.
It was. And but then by the end of the play, it's like everything has, the order is restored, as it were.
But it's a new order because they've accepted the Catholic
Ferdinand
monarchs
and Isabella,
as being in charge of them.
Yeah.
So one of the themes, I suppose, and one of the best themes for me was women's rights, and you could argue that it's quite a feminist play, but on the other hand,
yes.
But on the other hand, the women's rights that they're arguing for is the right to not be raped, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's quite a low bar, or the right to be able to choose which man is going to be in control of them.
Yes.
And likewise for the rural community of the town, it's the right to be able to choose who's going to be in charge, as opposed to, so it's kind of like a democratic play in a way.
Yes, but not, yes, it's that they should have some say in which lord rules them, as opposed to we're going to take control ourselves.
Yeah.
So
it's been used for the political angle quite often through history, and it's quite often been used by communist states because it kind of idealizes collective action and collective identity. The townspeople lose their individuality in order to become just the town. So that's quite a kind of communist kind of theme, but it's not fulfilled because in the end they take the king and queen as in charge of them.
So is there anything we need to add, or are we is that kind of what we want to say about this play?
I had some other things that, I made some notes based on things that other people said. I ruthlessly plagiarized other people's. But when we're giving a little introduction to the play,
you had a look and a think, which is good, and
assembled them together. There's multiple rebellions that happen in the play. So there's two rebellions. Fernand Gomez, the commander, rebels against the Catholic monarchs who should be in charge of them, or based on historical events, end up being the kind of the rightful.
So they're the victors, so obviously they were the right ones.
And the villagers as well rebel against what could be seen as the rightful rulers. And there's another character that the commander persuades to join him in that rebellion, who is the maestra, who's like a very young, maybe 18 to 20-year-old man, who the commander kind of manipulates into getting involved in battles. And at the end you have the Catholic monarchs coming in, and quite often they acted in this role in plays, or not necessarily Catholic monarchs, but the king or queen would come in and solve everything, and so the maestra is forgiven for being young, and then the town is forgiven for being possibly in the right. But you get the feeling that for both of them it's a bit of they might not have forgiven them if they could have worked it differently, but at that time it was like politically expedient to do so. So I liked that there were those parallels, and I think that is one of the things that kind of shows that there is a bit of structure and there is a bit of thought that's gone into the play.
So the idea that this play, once I knew that this was written in order to maybe just be performed 3 times, say, I felt differently about it.
But even though it was written in haste and could have had more work, there was definitely some degree of sort of structure and development, and there was use of symbols and stuff and motifs and things of like referring to people as tigers
or lions and wild beasts, and lovely interludes like the wedding.
Laurentia and Frondoso.
Frondoso, funny name, great names. Yes, Frondoso. Yes, they're getting, so there's like little like happy interlude with musicians, and you could imagine how that would play out on
and these plays
stage.
were typically sort of surrounded by, before and after the play you'd have like singing and performances and stuff, so it's like a bit of celebration to the events.
So you can gather that we found this extraordinarily interesting, as I say, even though it's not necessarily the best actual bit of drama that we've ever discussed.
Yes. And like with many of our plays, I would actively go and see it performed. I think if somebody was putting it on near me, or if I found a good version online. There is a 1972 adaptation for TV,
Spanish
RTV,
telly.
TVE, which we watched a little extract of. We watched Laurencia's monologue, but I don't think I'd watched the whole of that. It was a little bit 1970s. Yes, and she says, "I'm just dishevelled, and her hair's just perfect." But she's got a little bit of mud on her face, so dishevelled,
and her body's ripped.
Yes. I wouldn't maybe watch that.
Yeah.
In full, but I'd see it on stage.
I'd see it on stage. Oh yeah, I'd definitely see it on stage. But I wouldn't read more of his plays, I think, as a reading experience.
No, perhaps not. I'd be more likely to read another one by Calderon, or maybe one of the other Spanish playwrights from the period. Yeah.
Whereas reading Don Quixote, I'm thinking this is just really good. I'm really, as a reading experience. So there we go. Well.
That's another discussing drama.
And next month we're going to read a play by
Kaite O'Reilly.
To fit with the Disability Readathon in April. So